coming up on Lawmakers. The House votes to limit the Public Service Commission's input on a proposed natural gas pipeline. Plus new rules for billboards on Georgia's highways. And a warning for Georgia 400 toll violators: beware, your loophole is closing. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, the Senate votes to give responsibility for protecting Georgia's courthouses to local sheriffs.
And Democrats express concern over recent changes to state employees' health insurance. But our lead story tonight, debate over a possible natural gas pipeline. Today, the House passed a bill that would require the Public Service Commission to make an up or down vote on a new natural gas pipeline in the state. House Bill 1325 passed 110 to 59. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman now joins us live from the Capitol with more on today's debate. Jesse.
Well, thank you, Nwandi. Atlanta Gas Light is already authorized to build a pipeline from the Elba Island port, but under this bill, the PSC would have limited input in setting AGL's building recuperation rates. That limitation was the focus of today's debate.
We can take advantage of the natural advantage that we have in having an Elba Island on our shores and being early in the process of assuring ourselves of this component on energy supply well into our future. A future that is going to be greatly determined by the decisions we make here and now on this most urgent matter of our state's energy supply.
Now, what you're asking us to do is to pay for this. The consumer pay for this. But guess what? Now, this is over and above the base rate for AGL, ladies and gentlemen. Over and above. Not in the base rate, over and above. And in the bill, it says that the Public Service Commission shall make the marketer at AGL's cost. In the bill. Now, what does that cost?
Can the gas company build this pipeline from Elba Island without this legislation? Yes, they can. They can play by the rules that are on the law books now and build this pipeline. What this bill does is change the rules. What it does is weaken the Public Service Commission's power to be the voice of the consumer.
How many times in your memory can you recall the PSC not, for example, approving something just yes or no without even wanting to discuss the thing?
I believe my information, and correct me if I'm wrong if anybody knows, that that's an unprecedented procedural option.
How do you expect, with a diminishing supply that can be interrupted as we've seen, what is a progressive growing state supposed to do? Sit back and do nothing?
And the bill passed with no amendments. An attempt by Democrats to pass an amendment that could re-regulate the gas industry was ruled not germane by House Speaker Glenn Richardson. The bill now goes over to the Senate. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
The House also today agreed to limit the height of billboards across the state and to outlaw advertising for adult entertainment on the roadside signs. But House Bill 1097 passed without a controversial proposal to allow companies with lower billboards to clear more of the trees around their signs. Much of the hour-long debate centered on tree conservation and how to balance this issue with business interests. Here's a sample of today's debate, beginning with bill sponsor Tom McCall.
I have a bill here, a paid bill, that Lamar Advertising paid $53,833 to remove some trees in front of one face on one billboard. That's what they had to pay. $53,833. And I'm not talking about both sides of the billboard. I'm talking about one face, which is one sign that you look at. That's what's going on, and it's ridiculous for a private company, especially a mom-and-pop organization, when you get out in rural Georgia, to have to pay these kind of prices.
If you meet the new height restrictions, you qualify for additional permits, and it waives the tree trimming fee. So you can cut state-owned trees without having to pay the state anything. The current per-tree funds that are being assessed, those pay right now, those funds go towards landscaping projects. I don't know how many of y'all knew that, but that helps pay for, across the state, plants along the highway system and for the labor to landscape them.
I don't think that this
type legislation has ever been about trees. I don't truly in my heart ever believe it was about trees. It's about billboards, not trees. People don't like billboards. Well, you know what? Get over it. Callaway Gardens is off the beaten track. If Callaway Gardens didn't have a billboard down there on Interstate 85 South, what would it impact the business of Callaway Gardens?
I remember a few years ago when we had a bill like this that came up, and there were a few people that called me out in the hall, and they were a little bit upset with me, and they were going to call Mr. Callaway and tell him how I was working against working for billboards and against the trees. And so I just casually said, when you call him, tell him I said hi, because he just gave us $75,000 for billboards to advertise for Callaway Gardens. And so, yes, we love trees, and yes, we love a growing economy. So I think you have to find a good mix with both of those.
House Bill 1097 passed as amended by a vote of 145 to 70. It now moves to the Senate.
Meanwhile, a bill making it easier to prosecute Georgia 400 toll booth violators passed the House today. Representative Joe Wilkinson sponsors House Bill 1190, which aims to close a current loophole in the law where State Road and Tollway Authority has found it difficult to collect unpaid fines. Lawmakers David Zelski is standing by live at the Capitol with the details. David.
Well, Gerald, according to the Tollway Authority, people who owed money were coming into court and saying, I wasn't in my car at that time. So under current law, the authority can't collect. It may say cruise, but cruising through this booth comes at a price, 50 cents. However, by not paying that 50 through a cruise card or throwing coins in a bucket, fines can stack up. One man reaching fees over $13,000. Representative Wilkinson believes House Bill 1190 is the answer to this problem.
At the end of fiscal year 2005, there were $906,000 outstanding in unpaid tolls and administrative recovery fees. Some drivers have literally hundreds of violations. I'm sure you've seen the media coverage. House Bill 1190 provides a more effective way for the authority to collect outstanding fees. It focuses only on those with multiple violations. It provides a fair and independent process for those accused of multiple violations. It changes the current court fine to a civil monetary penalty. It protects vehicle owners if the car is stolen. It protects corporate owners and rental car agencies. And thanks to the Transportation Committee, it now includes teeth so that multiple repeat violators can have their vehicle registration automatically suspended if they do not pay the fines and fees determined within 30 days by the Office of State Administrative Hearings. This has worked well in other states. Georgia 400 toll is in place for at least 5 more years. We've got public-private initiatives coming on, so we really need this legislation. Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I yield the will.
Now, under House Bill 1190, the car owner could be fined up to $70 regardless of who's driving, and the vehicle's registration would be suspended until the owner paid up. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
The House today also agreed to allow the residents of Johns Creek in northeast Fulton County to decide whether to incorporate. Representative Mark Burkhalter explains House Bill 1321.
It allows about 65,000 people in unincorporated North Fulton County to have a chance to vote to determine whether or not they want to be their own city. And let me just tell you, folks, that from over a year worth of work, from grassroots efforts, I've never in my lifetime seen so many people want just a little piece of self-government as I've seen over this past year. Well, the reality of the world when we passed the city of Sandy Springs last year has a ripple effect on the remaining areas of Fulton County that are unincorporated, and specifically tax dollars distribution, sales tax dollars distributions, and how that affects the remaining unincorporated areas. Fulton County is a very unique county. It underserves from north to south all of its citizens that are in the unincorporated areas. You read about it daily in the paper about the dysfunctional nature of the county and how everything from the tax assessors to the sheriff has problems.
If it passes, the General Assembly House Bill 1321 will permit a July referendum for the residents of Johns Creek to decide whether to become a city. The measure passed 138 to 8 and now moves to the Senate.
And the state Senate today voted to make county sheriffs responsible for courthouse security and make Superior Court judges responsible for approving those security plans. Here's Senator Joseph Carter.
The work on this bill actually began on March the 12th of 2005, the day after Brian Nichols went on a shooting rampage here in the city that led to the loss of 4 lives. I'm proud to tell you that the day following that, the Georgia State Senate responded by forming a 7-member bipartisan study committee to look into the issue of courthouse security and security in buildings across this state. And very simply, what this bill does is it makes it clear in the Georgia Code that the sheriff of the county is the law enforcement officer whose duty it is to provide security for courthouses and courthouse annex buildings. It lists in the code, there is a list of official duties for the sheriff, and it adds this duty, that the sheriff has the duty to develop and implement a comprehensive plan for security of that county courthouse and also of any courthouse annex buildings, which many of our counties have. And that prior to the implementation of the security plan, he's to submit that plan to the chief judge of the circuit of the Superior Court where the buildings are located, and that the security plan may be accepted or modified by order of the Superior Court. Now, the reason that that is necessary is because it's important that we maintain dialogue between sheriffs and judges.
Senate Bill 462, the courthouse security measure, passed 52-1 and now moves to the House.
Meanwhile, 4 bills received a due pass from the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee today. One piece of legislation would revise licensing for private detectives and security officers.
This allows for large corporations, for example, perhaps a Home Depot or a Georgia Power, that have in-house security agencies to name a security director as the person who would be applying for the license. The way it is written now, you'd really have to be a primary stockholder or officer of the corporation, and I seriously doubt if the president of Bernie Marcus of Depot would be the one out there getting a private detective's license. But this allows them to designate a specific person as the security director.
Other bills passed were a measure to end criminal prosecution of Section 8 housing fraud by allowing offenders to pay back monies taken. Also approved House Bill 1209, which authorizes 10 state motorcycle troops to patrol urban interstates, allowing city and county enforcement to focus more on preventing accidents on their local roads. Urban interstates would be defined as Interstate 285 and all interstates lying inside the Atlanta perimeter.
1234 is a very short bill that addresses the ability of constables to carry deadly weapons. And before I proceed, I'd just like to explain what a constable is, elaborate on it a little bit. A constable basically acts as a sheriff of the magistrate court. They also have statutory arrest authority, and in some courts they provide security, serve warrants, and perform arrest as ordered by the chief magistrate judge. Constables have a rural flavor. You won't find them much in our urban areas or courts, but they are very prevalent in our rural areas, South Georgia, North Georgia, Middle Georgia, and they're in about 40% of the magistrate courts.
Democratic leadership held their weekly press conference today to announce a bill that would require General Assembly approval for any changes to the state employee health benefit plan. They said this legislation is in response to several teachers and state employees who were outraged over the Department of Community Health entering them into a contract with a new provider in January without informing them about the details.
This affects every state employee or anyone under the state health benefit plan in this state. That you'd have to come back by legislation to correct a problem that was created administratively is shameful. People have always worked for the state because they had good benefits, they had good retirement, and they would take less money to do that. But now when you take away a strong health benefit plan, you do no raises for several years, it's going to be more and more difficult to keep good people in government if we continue this way.
Representative Baumhanner then discussed House Bill 1115, which aims to help those primarily in rural areas who've been forced to travel at times up to 100 miles to get the health care they need.
It sets up for provisional credentialing. I mean, some of these doctors signed contracts back in the fall, and they don't have their credentials yet. So people are having to either pay out of network for them or having to go somewhere else. Now, that may be fine in some metro areas, but not in rural Georgia. There was an oncologist in southeast Georgia that had not been credentialed. And these people, you're talking about doing treatment for cancer is very expensive, and you can't afford to go out and network with that. So they'd have to go somewhere else.
Hanner later said that people in rural Georgia aren't mad about these recent changes. They're just frightened.
More physical education in many state schools will be the result if Senate Bill 474 becomes law. Senator Joseph Smith says schools need to pay more attention to student health and fitness. The bill passed by the Senate today provides for a State Department of Education position to coordinate phys ed. Senator Carter said the position will be subject to funding.
So the bill establishes that position at the Department of Education at no cost, virtually no cost to the state. In addition, the bill does address a specific number of minutes for physical activity and physical education in our school system. Currently, as I stated, at the elementary grades level, K through 5, it's 90 clock hours per year. That basically translates into 90 minutes per week. Many school systems offer 30 minutes of physical education 3 times per week. This bill requires 150 minutes per week, which is essentially 30 minutes per day in grades K through 5.
Senator Steve Thompson said he agreed that students needed to be healthier, but pointed out that more time spent in physical education meant less time spent in reading and math.
What we're doing is taking time off task, which helped us to raise our standards 2 years in a row with tests. And we've averaged class size. We've not required them to tell us where they spend their money. But now we're taking less time on task. And if anybody in the world, once we get this educational code section through, thinks that we've made improvements, it's my opinion these last couple of years we have diluted.
Senate Bill 474, the Student Health and Fitness Act, passed 42-7 and goes to the Georgia House. And the Senate today also passed a bill that protects teachers from being coerced into changing a student's grade. Senator Chip Rogers explains.
This is known as the Grade Integrity Act of 2006, a very simple bill brought to me by our educators. And it simply says that no classroom teacher shall be required, coerced, intimidated, or disciplined in any manner in order to change a student's grade. We put a couple of exceptions in there that a simple discussion between the administration and a teacher does not constitute coercion. And we also added on page 2 another exception saying that a person from the administration may change the grade if in fact they feel it needs to be changed, but they would have to note that in fact that they are the person who did so. The administrators are happy with it. The teachers are very happy with it. We don't have any opposition to my knowledge. And with that, Mr. President, I will yield for questions.
Senate Bill 288, the Grade Integrity Act, passed 50-0 with an amendment by Senator Steve Thompson. That amendment protects teachers from being fired over grade disputes. The bill heads for the House.
Well, the House voted today to reinstate a law allowing videotape depositions of illegal immigrants to be used in criminal proceedings. Here's Representative John Lunsford as he explains House Bill 986.
1996 Olympics, we had a statute extremely similar to this in place in Georgia, and allowed us to take videotape depositions of people that were foreign nationals within our state, so that if they had to travel back home afterwards, their deposition could still be used. This bill was requested by the district attorneys of Georgia and the solicitors, and it's a very simple matter. Most of your crimes against people of foreign nationalities or illegal residents or illegal aliens are committed by other illegal aliens. At the time that the crime is committed, they have a statement. When it comes time to testify, the person that the crime was committed against may actually have been deported, may leave the country, or fail to testify. The DAs would like this legislation simply so they could prosecute the criminal who's already been arrested for the crime with a deposition in that case of a foreign national who's no longer here.
House Bill 986 passed without opposition and now moves to the Senate. Also in the House today, a decision to extend the jury exemption for parents of young children from 3 to 6 years old. Representative Barry Loudermilk explains.
Currently, Georgia law provides a deferment or exemption for primary caregiver of small children up to the age of 3 years old and younger. This bill, with a friendly amendment that I have signed on to, would actually bring the age limit up to the age of 6, meaning a primary caregiver who has custody of a child, generally a stay-at-home mom, would be able to request or receive a deferment or exemption for jury duty for a child up to the age of 6 years. That would put it commensurate with the compulsory age of attendance.
The bill also extends an exemption to parents who homeschool their children. House Bill 376 passed without opposition. It now moves to the Senate. The House also voted to change the requirement for dispensing opticians. Representative Jill Chambers presented that bill.
House Bill 881 provides for the definition of minimum apprenticeship requirements to become a licensed dispensing optician. A licensed optician fills the prescriptions of either an optometrist or an ophthalmologist. We worked with the Licensing Board and the Opticians Association of Georgia to put in these national standards.
House Bill 881 passed 161-0 and now moves to the Senate.
The Senate Banking and Finance Committee met today and gave a do-pass recommendation to legislation that would give consumers greater protection when pawning their automobiles. Committee Chair Bill Hamrick explains how pawnbrokers and consumers would be affected by Senate Bill 535.
It'll give them notice if a title lender is going to repossess a vehicle for non-payment of the loan. It'll give the consumer notice that that's going to happen so that they can get their personal belongings out or either pay the lender and avoid that situation. And then once the repossession occurs, then they'll have 20 days to get the car back before it can be sold to cover the debt. So it gives them a time frame to get the car back after it's been repossessed. It also allows them a day after they take out the loan to pay the money back without interest and get out of it, so that if they go home and think, well, I shouldn't have done that, they can get out of it. And several other things like that that just give the consumer the benefit of the doubt in terms of trying to keep the vehicle and making sure they know what type loan this is before they enter into it. The pawnbrokers would obviously rather have less regulation than more, so the more we require them to do, the less likely they are to be accepting of it. But we tried to work with them to let them know that we thought this was important, and so they came to the table and have supported most of what we're doing.
Again, Senate Bill 535 was given a do-pass recommendation and moves to Senate rules.
Lawmakers honored National Guard Day at the state capitol today. General David Poitras presented National Guard Service Awards to Mitchell Bush, Tina Correa, Sonny Park, Sergeant Pearson DeLoach, and Leslie Gruber for outstanding service with the National Guard of Georgia. Governor Sonny Perdue presented the National Guard with a proclamation of National Guard Day and encouraged members of the National Guard.
I'm proud of this group. I couldn't be more proud. As Commander-in-Chief, I just want you all to know that what our National Guard is doing for Georgia and for the United States of America is beyond description for me. All of our troops in harm's way are on our minds and our hearts and our prayers continually. As many of you know, I had the honor of spending Thanksgiving holiday with our Georgia Guard troops in Iraq, and as I characterized that visit when I came back, people were obviously very curious of how was it, what were they like, how were they doing. I told people, if you've ever been to the hospital, maybe to visit a seriously ill relative or a friend, and you go to be a blessing and you see their spirit, their resolve, their determination, and their faith, and you come away blessed. That was the way it was my trip to Iraq.
Georgia's Adjutant General David Poitras visited the State Senate today as part of National Guard Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Senator Hill, Senator Douglas, distinguished members of the Senate, General Nesbitt, Americans all. I accept that round of applause on behalf of all the assembled guardsmen here and guardsmen throughout Georgia and throughout the world who are serving you today. That applause belongs to them. I appreciate this opportunity to continue the long-standing tradition of appearing before you on Guard Day to give you a thumbnail of where we are with respect to your National Guard. Last year, we were on the brink of deploying our largest combat unit to Iraq. Today, I'm pleased to tell you we're on the brink of bringing them home. They should be home. The advance party will start coming home next month, and then they'll flow in through the end of March, end of April, and perhaps the first part of May. And along about July the 4th, I expect we'll have one whale of a reception and a welcome home party for those guys and gals who've done such a great job for you.
Meanwhile, UGA head football coach Mark Richt was in the State Senate today to deliver the morning devotion. He also paid tribute to Georgia National Guard members in the Senate gallery.
Just want to tell you how honored I am to be here today, and also want to tell you how honored I am to be before the Georgia National Guard. I love and respect the job that you all do and all of our servicemen and women in the country, and I'm thankful for what you do for us. I know a lot of times people think our players are heroes, or sometimes they think coaches are heroes, but we're not even close to being what a true hero is, and I appreciate the fact that you all are heroes. Every staff meeting we have at Georgia, we always open with a devotional. We do it because we know we don't know all the answers. We do it because we care very much about the people that we're in charge of. We're in charge of those 130 to 135 players and a lot of other people too. But we want to do right by them. We want to serve them in the right way, and we want to help them along the way. And we make a lot of decisions that are very important, just as you all do. We don't make nearly as many important decisions as you do, but we do make a lot of decisions on a daily basis, and we're trying to do things right. So we feel like the best place to find wisdom is in God's Word.
The House took a moment this morning to pay tribute to one of its former members, Representative Eleanor Richardson.
I'm here this morning to pay honor and respect to one of our former members who died yesterday. And some of you may remember and may have served with Eleanor Richardson. She was a wonderful woman. She served in this body from 1975 to 1991. She was one of the first female legislators in this body. She was a tireless advocate for women, for children, for the elderly, for the disabled. She has a building in DeKalb County, the Eleanor Richardson Health Building, named after her on Wynn Way. Just an amazing woman, and I know many of y'all served with her in various capacities, if not in the legislature, but through the Commission on Women and the League and all the other things that she did in our community. So I'm asking now that we take a moment of silence in honor of Eleanor Richardson. Thank you.
And coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the House is expected to consider legislation that would repeal the age requirement for marriage in cases of pregnancy or live birth. The Senate is expected to hear a bill that would make it easier to prosecute animal fighting and baiting. We'll have those stories and all the latest from Under the Gold Dome tomorrow night at 7. Meanwhile, if you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Georgia Outdoors. That's coming up next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 22nd legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wendy Lawson.
And I'm Gerald Bryant. Thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.